Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your host, Mark Bidwell.
Hello, welcome back to the Innovation Ecosystem. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. My name is Mark Bidwell. My guest today is Josh Spodek, who was introduced to me by Caroline Webb, who many of you will know was a previous guest on last season's show. Now, Josh describes his journey from being a PhD student, and he's actually a rocket scientist with a PhD in astrophysics. This journey from being a PhD student to launching and failing in the business world, and more recently to becoming a sought-after leadership coach and adjunct professor at NYU. And at the heart of his approach is that he teaches people not just the what, but the how. And for those of you who are hungry for tools and practical exercises, and I know many of you listening are desperate or really keen to get to the so what, this interview and the materials that Josh is making available in his new book and on his online program is packed full of them. So, for example, self-awareness has been a big topic for us. Kevin Cashman, Caroline Webb, Whitney Johnson all highlight how paramount it is. And he offers a great exercise called the raisin exercise, or the 3 raisin exercise, which we include as a downloadable tool. And it's a really very simple exercise, but one with enormously profound implications. And I remember doing this about 4 years ago on a flight to Vancouver, and it sticks with me, the process, but also the so whats and the implications of this exercise. I think you'll find that really profound. So this and other exercises help us tap into our emotional intelligence and to cultivate our self-awareness and to learn to listen to our inner voice and the voices of others based on the principles of what he calls experiential learning, which is a foundation of what we're calling ecosystem learning. And this underpins our the programs that we're developing at the moment. And finally, he explains why these are important skills for leaders to possess if we want to truly motivate and influence those around us. You can't lead without understanding, without patience, and without awareness. And so this is at the heart of his new book, Leadership Step by Step. And without further ado, here is Josh. Hello, this is Mark Bidwell, and welcome back to the Innovation Ecosystem. With me today is Joshua Spodek, who is Adjunct Professor of NYU, leadership coach, workshop leader for Columbia Business School, columnist for Inc., founder of Spodek Academy, and author of a new book coming out soon called Leadership Step by Step. And I'm going to keep going, Josh, because this is such a great bio. You've been described as an astrophysicist turned new media whiz. You visited North Korea twice, you swam across the Hudson River, you've done burpees every day for 6 years and counting, and you live in Greenwich Village. So welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
And now, Josh, there's a lot more in your bio. We'll put this all in the show notes, but maybe the place to start is, how do you answer the question, that you might get asked at dinner parties, what do you do?
That's not an easy question for me to answer because I haven't really lived the style that a lot of people have. Years ago when the book 4-Hour Workweek came out, at that time I was living about an 8-hour work week. So I thought 4 or 8, that's about the same. I've always felt like when I graduated business school, a lot of my classmates, they went off and made a lot of money. But my strategy has always been figure out what I need and make sure I cover that. So I have little projects that cover that. And then the rest of my time is my time, and I figure out what are the projects that, what are my values and what do I want to work on most. So if I'm in a business environment where people really want something, if I'm in a boring environment where people are boring and I don't really care to meet them, then I'll say, yeah, I'm a professor at NYU and I teach, and now I talk about the book more. When I'm with people that I don't think are really boring, then I'll share more of, I'll say to them, what's your passion? And some people are like, passion? And I say, yeah, what's something that you care about, something you do. And I much more prefer to talk about people's motivations and what people care about.
Yeah. And there's an exercise that we might well come back in your new book, which actually gets into that in quite a lot of detail, which is actually a very, it's a lead with empathy exercise. I think it really is. Let's make sure that we cover that towards the end, because I know there's a huge amount to get into. But that will bring
yeah, because to say what's your passion is, it took practice to get to where that worked for me. So yeah, I'm glad you said that.
So we'll come back, but then you have. Just want to make sure I get this right, because each of these would have taken a huge amount of energy and work. But you've got 5 degrees, including the PhD. I mean, tell us about the journey from academia into business, first of all, and then maybe the second piece is that led up to writing this book. But maybe the first transition from academia to entrepreneurship.
Sure. I mean, I went in to get the PhD for physics because at the time it was what I loved. My dad's a history professor and he has a PhD and he's a professor. And so that world felt natural to me. And then when I got into physics, I still love the field. I love the subject. But the life of research was, in today's world, it's a lot of debugging and it's years and years of work for data that comes way much later than it ever did before. So I felt trapped in that field. I felt like I could either keep doing research, which I didn't really want to do. I could go and support other people doing research in industry. Or I could go to Wall Street. And none of these options were really what I wanted to do. And some friends approached me and said, let's start a company. And I had no idea what entrepreneurship was about or business was about. But I came up with this idea that became an invention that became the what our first company was. Mm-hmm. And my model for business at the time was I thought it's Exxon Valdez. I thought, we want to make money. And if we run ashore and ruin a shoreline with some oil because we need some profit, that'll happen. But then I started learning about how to write a patent, how to write a business plan, realizing that if you're going to sell something, you have to deliver value to someone. And it was the hints of compassion and empathy coming into my life that were never there before. And that's what business became for me, and creating value and understanding what value meant. A totally different side of things than I expected, and very welcome to me. And the more that I learned, the more that I liked it. So that took me back to business school. And that's where I learned my first classes. That's where I found out that there were classes in leadership and you could study emotional awareness, mm-hmm. develop social skills.
So I mean, because I think in the book, and we'll come to that in a minute, in your new book, Leadership Step by Step, you talk a little bit about the challenges of the business going bankrupt, almost going bankrupt, and you being being relieved of your position as founder and finding yourself in a difficult situation. I think this was in 2003. So was that the point that you began to start work on the leadership, on understanding leadership in far more practical terms?
Yeah, pardon me while I wipe the tears away of the most painful periods.
Well, no, tell us about it. Because I mean, a lot of our listeners, Josh, they won't necessarily be, maybe tears are a regular part of their lives, but if they're sitting in large organizations responsible for innovation, trying to move the super tanker a couple of inches, it's challenging, it's hard work, it's emotionally perhaps not as draining as being an entrepreneur, but nonetheless, it does take out a lot of energy. So what happened, and most, I suppose, more importantly, what did you learn from what happened?
Oh man, so many things happened. I mean, first, when things are going well, I had a dream, and it was a dream to make this invention a reality and to be a big global thing, because it was a display that we put on the walls of subway tunnels, and when the train goes by, it looks like a movie screen outside the subway car window. And so a lot of people have seen something like it. We have a few competitors.
There's one in Zurich. There's actually one at Zurich Airport, which is great. There's someone called Heidi standing in the field with a cow as you go past the on the underground. It's wonderful.
I've seen the video of that one. I haven't seen it in person. And that's a different technology than ours. And there's subways all over the world. And they have, from a business perspective, they have tremendous real estate that they're not using, and we can bring them money that would offset fares, and it would be valuable for everybody. So what are some things that happened? I mean, we were building in the 90s, and we were not part of the internet bubble, but when the internet bubble burst, our funding went away. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was very difficult to get investment at that point. Advertising went away, and our launch date, which we set for, we spent all summer of this one particular summer setting our launch, and in conjunction with our PR firm, which picked it should be a Tuesday because then Wednesday is the best day to get the news out, and it should be at this time for this reason. And we sent these invitations out. A friend was over the other day, and I said, read this invitation. I covered over the bottom, which was the date, and it said here's our big launch. It's going to be a global thing. It's going to be great. And then I took my hand away to reveal the date, and he keeps reading and says September 11th, 2001.
Oh, God.
And that was our planned launch date. And I was in the tunnels the night before, working all night to get the display working perfectly. And, obviously what happened with us was a very small thing on the scale of that day. And my business is not that big compared to a lot of what happened, but Coca-Cola was our debut advertiser, and they completely pulled all their advertising. I think we are their first advertising back several months later. But when you're a startup that you just spent all this money to build your display, to go without revenue for all that time, and then to be unable to go into subway tunnels because of all these safety well-intentioned and the right choices by everyone, but we couldn't bring a wrench into the tunnel. And so so here I have a PhD, I can do all the analysis, but the team didn't need analysis at this time. The team didn't need abstract problem solving. It needed human to human, like, this is a difficult time. How are we going to get through this as a team together? And so this was like a huge whammy of things that I think would be difficult for a lot of people to handle. And, we ran out of money. I mean, no one foreclosed on us. No one said, like, got us to declare bankruptcy, but we weren't going to make it. And the investors, in exchange for putting some money in to keep the company alive in any way, and we're still alive today. This is why I can still talk about it. Is that they put some money in, just barely enough to eke it out. But Josh, you can't be CEO. And that at the time I was, I had a lot more pride and felt like, how can you possibly kick me out of the company I started? You don't know this technology like I do. You don't, and then you have to face the fact that they have more control over the company than I did, and that was that. And I spent some time struggling to make sense of it. Meanwhile, I had a mortgage to pay. So you can't just sit around, and it's really difficult to, in today's world, especially in the entrepreneurial world, people are like, oh, you got to try and fail, and failing is great. Fail, fail, fail. And I haven't heard a lot of people exploring the feelings, the emotions that you face in situations like that. It's not like, it's really grueling. I mean, everyone on the way up was like, we're all in this together. Let's do this together. And on the way down, they're like, I got to get mine. And the one big thing that one of the big values I got out of it was, like, my relationship with my mother improved a lot, because when you don't know whom to trust anymore, your family's got your back.
Yeah. And so I mean, there's we could spend a long time talking about that, but I mean, I'm really keen, as I think you are, to talk about the book, because this is a book which, you have great, you put a lot of energy into, and you've also got sort of great aspirations for. So maybe the segue here is, I mean, you talk a little bit about, about the emotions. I mean, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the emotions that you felt, but perhaps let's start by, the reason for the book, and then the second piece is the premise for the book. Because this is built on a pretty fundamental premise which dates back to, piano teaching at the turn of the century, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah. So out of this emerged that I realized that I wanted to keep starting businesses, and I went to business school and learned that you could learn something about leadership. But after business school, I was very enamored with this, because I realized everything I'd been learning up until then, it was always facts and knowledge. And the more I learned, the smarter I got. But when I learned about leadership things, I changed as a person. And that's something that had never happened before. So I was very interested in it. So after school, I started learning. And I studied, like, evolutionary psychology and positive psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy and everything I could. And it took me a while to realize I was learning about something, but it was only when I put it into practice that I really internalized it.
And is that what you mean by when you changed as a person? It was the point where you actually started doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The way I look at it now is, I was in business school, most of my learning was still lecture, case study, reading papers, writing papers, and that's more valuable than nothing. But after business school, it took me a while. I was still learning and reading until I started realizing there's a way of learning. There are multiple ways of learning that are not what I would call, traditional school is intellectually challenging, but emotionally and socially not challenging and more passive. It's very easy to talk about someone else in a case study, much harder for you to handle things yourself. And so I learned about there were two big things that changed and that forced me to write the book. I looked at every bookshelf, every resource, every class I found did not have what I found was most important, and that's the following. One is there's a style of teaching called project-based learning. It's much bigger in K-12 learning, and it's a more active approach. It goes back to John Dewey, Maria Montessori. It's a long tradition, and a friend of mine is the founding principal of a science leadership academy, and he's a very big practitioner of this. And I learned his community, and I met the people there who are steeped in this tradition of teaching. And I saw it at work, and I realized that this is much more effective for this style of learning.
And you call it's project-based learning, is it?
Project-based learning,
yeah.
That's what they call it. I call it more active learning or experiential learning.
Yeah.
And business has much more of it than universities do, because universities, the professors are all, especially the more elite the university, the more the professor got there through publish or perish. And the tenured faculty who make all the decisions, they tend to be very knowledgeable in their field, but they don't have a whole lot of history of practicing, nor of learning how to teach effectively. So they tend to do what they learned, which is preparing people to become an academic. In the working world, like Marshall Goldsmith was another big influence of mine, and he's very clear. He gives people exercises. And two of the exercises in my book came from him. Even there, his exercises were like, here's one that's great in this area, here's one that's great in that area. And a lot of books in business, I think, are tremendous and very effective, but still the exercises are, here's something that's great here, here's something that's great there. And one thing that I did, well, let me give one more background, is as you alluded to, is learning how to play a musical instrument, or learning how to act, or learning how to sing or dance. That style of learning, nobody teaches someone how to play piano by saying, let's put you in a classroom with 20 other people and lecture to you for a year on musical theory and perfect fifths and harmonics. You always start with scales or something, the basics. Now the scales aren't hit a bunch of keys on the piano randomly. There's theory in the exercise. But at the beginning, the teacher has to know the theory, but you don't teach it by lecture, you teach it through practice. And so that's what Marshall Goldsmith was doing. And so what I realized, what all these other fields have, these active, social, emotional, expressive, performance-based fields like acting and singing and playing musical instruments, they start with basics, and you have this progression, an integrated, comprehensive progression from basic to advanced. And so I took a couple of Marshall exercises, a couple of other professors of mine exercises, plus other exercises that were effective, and I put them together into what I have not found existing anywhere in leadership, is an integrated, comprehensive progression of exercises to take you from wherever you are, which could be as basic, the early stuff, it's basic, but it's basic in the way that, if you watch the NBA finals, before they start, people are still practicing jump shots. People are still practicing layups, or before Wimbledon, they're still practicing their ground strokes.
Yep.
Not because they don't know them, but because they're useful. And so I start with exercises like that, and then eventually build up over the course in the leadership book of about 20 exercises to some really advanced stuff that you can inspire people. Okay, so that was a long answer.
Yeah, no, I got it. I mean, let's get into some of those exercises in a minute. But I mean, because they are very challenging, some of those exercises, and I'm curious as to that they're based on experience that you've got in the classroom or teaching people, and understanding how they learn. So maybe we can get into some of those. But I mean, I think to summarize, I mean, it seems to me the book's more around the how versus the what, and it's even though while it is a book, it is also designed for a level of interaction and self-reflection, and the structure of the book, starts with the individual understanding the self, then goes to leading self, then goes to understanding others, then goes to leading others. Now, maybe we can, let's just get into a couple of these, perhaps, some exercises in the starting part of it, which is the understanding self. I mean, there's this lovely story of the 3 stonecutters and the belief exercise. Can you just talk a little bit about that, and why is that important, and for why is that foundational knowledge, if you like, for any kind of leadership journey, if you like?
Sure. So the context there is that the first unit on understanding yourself, it's about how your mind works, how you perceive things. Very basic in the sense of if you don't get this, then you're going to be missing out a lot on what leadership is about. Leadership is not about, if you're just trying to convince people all the time using just facts and rational debate, you're going to provoke a lot of debate back. So the story of the stonecutters is from Peter Drucker. I'm sure it was around before him, but he tells a story about three stonecutters, and someone comes along and sees three stonecutters. They're cutting stone, and the person says, "Oh, one of them is looks unhappy and miserable, and the other one is kind of neutral, and the other one is like super happy." And the person goes up to the first one and says, "What are you doing?" And the person says, "I'm just cutting stone. I got to work, and this is what I got to do." The next person, the neutral one, the person says, "What are you doing?" And the person says, "Well, I'm a craftsman. I'm a craftsperson, and I'm working on what I'm good at. And if you look at what I'm doing, you'll see that I'm doing some really good stonework." And then the person asks the third person, who's the one who's like really happy and really, beaming with pride, and says, "What are you doing?" And this person says, I'm helping build the most glorious cathedral in all the land." And so a big takeaway, a lot of people, there's different things you can take away from this. One of them is that the value of what is in something is not just it's not like there's intrinsic value to your work that you can get out of it. It's how you perceive it and what beliefs that you have. And the beliefs that you have are not set in stone, no pun intended. Mm-hmm. And to a lot of people, if you want to be a leader, it's important to be able to influence the beliefs that people have. On a more personal level, I see no value in being miserable in life. No matter what I've never seen a case where misery helped.
Yeah.
And you can change the beliefs that you have. And to me, it's a very enabling realization that the beliefs that you have change your emotional state, and your emotions are your motivations. So it changes how you behave and how people respond to you. So it changes your world. Yeah.
And Caroline Webb, previous guest who introduced us, her book covers a lot of that in detail. But the story that you gave is really important, not just as an individual. A lot of our listeners are individuals who are struggling to make sense of their work, and particularly if they're earlier on in their career, wondering whether this is it. They finally landed the job, and is this all there is to it? So I think the message there is that individuals can change their reality and change how they interpret the events that go on, to enable them to be the third stonecutter versus the second or the first stonecutter. But also, I think, Josh, the other piece here is that as a leader, creating a sense of purpose for the organization and connecting individuals with that sense of purpose is a core capability, or a foundational skill in many respects.
Yeah, and here's what compelled me to write this book, is that you can find that information in lots and lots of places. What I didn't find is a way to give you the skills to do those things. Mm-hmm. So, like, one of the things I do, I write on my blog every day, and I, for years, had heard people telling me, you should write a blog. You can, you get this value, you can get that value of it. I knew the value of it. What got me to actually do it was a friend sitting me down and showing me, this is how you do it, step by step. That's the title of my book, Step by Step.
Yep.
And so it's great to hear people say, you should do X, you should create value, you should you should give meaning to the work that your reports have. Well, that's great if you already know how to do it, but the reason people need the advice is they don't know how to do it. And the exercises, it's like telling a piano player, play with feeling. Or telling someone, an actor, just be yourself on stage. Well, it takes years and years and years of effort and practice to get to where you're like Daniel Day-Lewis, just being Lincoln on the screen. Now, you don't need years and years to become, you need years to become the best in the world, but to be really great at it, you need to practice. And what leadership lacked, it had no shortage of people saying, here's what you ought to do. Mm-hmm. I just didn't see specifically, here's what to do. And that's what my book is. And you said how some of them are really challenging. Some of the later ones are like extremely challenging, or they would be on their own. But because they're part of a progression, the 10th one is a little bit harder than the 9th one. If you did it on its own, it would be hard.
Yep.
And so I try to design them so that, like using the analogy of playing piano, you don't just learn the scales and go to Carnegie Hall. Before Carnegie Hall, you play a smaller stage. Before that one, you play a smaller stage. Before that, all the way back to your first recital, all the way back to your first scales. And that's what I tried to recreate, is a path to get to the challenging stuff with no big jumps.
So let's to bring this to life a little bit. I mean, my hope is that people will go out and buy the book. I thoroughly recommend it. But let's maybe we can pick an exercise and just take people through it such that they know what this actually looks like in practice. I mean, there are 3 or 4 exercises which I absolutely loved. I mean, there is the inner monologue exercise. There is the exercise around I did it with a couple of raisins actually. There's a feed forward exercise. Is it one that we can just and there's the belief exercise as well around sort of writing down your beliefs and other people's beliefs. Which one do you think is brings this to life most, to emphasize the point that you just made, Josh, around very few books having this kind of teaching people how to do it, if you like, or showing people how to do it?
Well, you happen to mention 3 that will go in a row. So I'll try to talk about those 3 because the raisins, followed by the inner monologue, followed by beliefs, they really work together well, and they're the foundation for a lot. So I'll start with the 3 raisins, and stop me if I go on too long. Mm-hmm. And I didn't make this exercise up. I got it from John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the top mindfulness researchers. He's also a guy who's a science PhD, and then went in to study something that wasn't what his degree was in. But he's been tremendously, foundational for mindfulness. Yeah. And he's up at UMass. So
he wrote something of Full Catastrophe Living or something like that. There's a couple of books I've got which are pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and this is from which book is it from? It's from, the name escapes me just because I forget it for a second. But anyway, this is from one of his books. And also, for people who are listening, I recommend if you look up his videos and just watch, like he gave a talk at Google that's on YouTube, and he gave other talks, really great stuff. And so it's all freely available. And the exercise is this: get 3 raisins, block off an hour of your time, and turn off the phone, turn off the computer, make sure you're not going to get interrupted. It won't take you an hour, but it's just give yourself an hour so you won't get interrupted. And put them in front of you and eat the 3 raisins one at a time as if you've never seen one before. And use all 5 senses. So there's taste, there's smell, there's touch, there's hearing. And don't start the second one until you've completely finished the first one. And when I give this exercise in class, I always ask the students, does this sound weird? And they're like, yeah, it does sound kind of weird. And after I give it, I always ask, all right, you said it was weird before doing it. Should I give this again next year, or is it too weird? And they always say, yes. This is an important exercise. Make sure you do this exercise. And I won't tell people what happens, but I will tell you everything that happens, because the experience is what happens. And you will taste things that you have not noticed that taste before. You will start thinking about how this raisin got here. And there's no way I could lecture to you or read to you or give a video for you about the physical sensation of what that flavor is, what those flavors are. And people start, in my experience, I was like, oh my God, that flavor, I know that flavor. That's the flavor of a raisin. I haven't paid attention to it in 20 years. Every raisin I've had, I've kind of been like, okay, there's that flavor, whatever. It's sweet, I like it. I just autopilot swallow. And then I start thinking, well, if I wasn't paying attention to that, what else am I not paying attention to? Am I not paying attention to what people say to me? Am I not paying attention to people's voices, their facial expression? And there's so many things. And this is just one thing that happens. And the reason the students get it is that it's an experiential experience. And life, all these interactions, these relationships that we have that leadership is based on, they're all based on these interactions and sensations. And if you don't realize this at that level, then you're building on a foundation that's not really there, or something that you're taking for granted that you're not really sure about. And so then it helps you become more aware. Oh, and then I have people write a reflection. Every exercise, you have to reflect on it to get to the next one in my course and on the online version. The book, I hope, I have these little stop signs at the end of each chapter, at the end of each exercise. Go away, put the book down. This is not about reading faster. This is, you don't get strong by reading about lifting weights. You have to actually lift the weights. And so the reflection will get people to think more about it. And if you do it the online version, then you get to the forum, which lets you get to see everybody else's reflections, and everyone does it differently. So you get to learn from each other. Mm-hmm. So now you're more aware of your mind. And the write your inner monologue exercise, which I got from Sri Kumar Rao, who's one of my professors. I took his leadership course at Columbia Business School. And this exercise is to notice the inner monologue, the voice inside your head, and write the exact word for word thoughts that are in your head. And a lot of people in class, I always say, can someone volunteer to say what you're thinking right now? And invariably they say, well, I'm thinking about the work I have to do for tomorrow, and I'm trying to think of what to schedule and stuff like that. And I say, okay, that's what you're thinking about. The actual words are probably something more like, oh, Josh is asking me to say something. He's asking me to say what I'm thinking, but what am I thinking? I can't really tell what I'm thinking. Stuff like that. And that inner monologue, even though it's what you're actually thinking virtually every waking moment of your life, we don't recognize it. And when you write it out, I tell people to do it every day, a couple times a day for a week, because the first couple of days you're just drinking from a fire hose and you can't get a sense of it. And then you start realizing how to do it, and you start picking it up. And by the end of it, and I also ask people in your reflections, write about trends. What did you notice? So, everyone's like, oh, I think songs get stuck in my head. But there's also lots of other things. There's a lot of judgment, a lot of negativity.
Yep.
But there's a big realization that I hope people get when they read the reflections of other people, is that it's not just me who thinks that way. It's the human mind works that way. And that realization is very liberating. So you don't feel so guilty about, thinking that your best friend is a jerk or something like that. It's like, yeah, we all think that sometimes. Then the beliefs exercise after that is the next level up. Now that you get it at a word for word level, what are the beliefs that we have? Are we building a cathedral? Are we eking out a living that we don't really like? And, at this stage, I'll describe them less and less, because unless you do them, you just hear me talk. But when you do them, the realizations is like, it becomes tangible and real in your mind in a way that my words never can. And no book that I've come across, no resource that I've come across, they're all just like play with feeling. And it's useful, great, important. And they'll say, here's the research that shows that, resilience is very important, or, not picking up the marshmallow correlates with, success in life and higher SAT scores. But what do you actually do in order to not pick up the marshmallow? Referring to the marshmallow experiment, which it's on Wikipedia if people don't know. How do you actually develop the skill to change yourself? Not that you can, but what do you actually do? And that my exercises are designed to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, bringing this back into the workplace, because this is so fundamental for any kind of, I would argue, leadership, development, personal development, innovation. It's very relevant that we're talking here, Josh, today, because yesterday we've got a program called the Innovation Leadership Circle, and there was an individual there talking about a business challenge that he's facing, and we didn't ask a question about beliefs, but he had an assumption about how his potential partners would react to a proposal. And once we uncovered that assumption and he began to reflect on that assumption, that belief, if you like, and reflected on, maybe I'm wrong. What if I am actually wrong? And maybe they're looking at the world completely differently. It unlocked a whole new, potential set of strategic options that he could pursue. So this is, the beliefs are, we take them into the workplace. They drive how we think about interacting with colleagues, interacting with the market, interacting with customers and partners. And it's really, hugely profound. If you can even just become aware of this, it does unlock all sorts of opportunities based on some of the things that I've seen in the marketplace anyway.
Yeah, to me, what leaders work with are people's beliefs and emotions. A carpenter works with a saw and a hammer and nails on wood. Programmers work with programming language and keyboards on computers. And leaders work with emotions, environments, beliefs, behaviors on people. And if you don't have a grasp of what beliefs are and how they work and how you can influence your own mind, then how can you influence others? Or rather, once you do, it's like learning how to use a handsaw. It's like learning how to use hammers. And if you just take these things for granted, you're kind of going to, maybe you can do it a little bit, but the beliefs that people have. Another story in my book is a classmate of mine from business school. She had this assignment to go to Mexico City, and with the one other person in her team, And she was looking forward to it because she was learning Spanish, and she was like, oh, great, I'll be immersed in Spanish culture or Spanish language, and I'll get to practice it. And months and months and months went by that she kept not going. And finally, it turned out that the other person on her team, that woman's mother was saying that Mexico City is really dangerous. And you had this conflict, but it was latent. People didn't know that it was there, that one wanted to go, the other didn't want to go. And to my mind, their engagement manager, the person who schedules when people go and who's in touch with the client, that person missed a leadership opportunity and possibly, did risk losing the client because he didn't realize that Mexico City meant one thing to one person and the other person had a different belief. And by not knowing how to work with beliefs, this person didn't know how to lead and didn't realize that there were tools at his disposal, didn't realize that there was conflict that was there. There's another, I once met a psychologist who studied intelligence, and she told me that flexibility with beliefs was a major component of intelligence. And I thought, that's odd. I never thought of it that way. And she said, yeah, if there's a problem, a big piece of intelligence is being able to solve a problem. And if there's a problem that you need a certain perspective to be able to solve it, and you are stuck in a different perspective, you will never be able to solve it, and that undercuts your intelligence. So flexibility in beliefs, which is a skill that you can learn.
Yep.
The opposite of which is I would call like being fundamentalist, there's only one way you can look at it. That's my way. And if you don't look at it that way, you don't make any sense to me. You're crazy. Well, if you're that way, then you're not going to be able to solve a lot of different problems. Be they tangible problems of like physical things out in the world, or emotional problems, or relationship problems.
Interesting. I mean, I noticed we'll put in the show notes the three videos that if that's okay with you, that you put out about the book. But in the videos, you show that wonderful advertising campaign by HSBC, which shows the same picture and three very, very different interpretations of it. And for those of us in Europe, we'll know. I mean, this is the campaign that runs through London Heathrow as you're getting on and off the planes, and there, as you go down the sort of fingers onto the planes, you see these wonderful campaigns of. I mean, we'll put them in the show notes, but they're all about how do you actually look at the world, and can you look at the world differently? I mean, they're very nice examples of the three stonecutter story, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that ad is showing we understand different ways of looking at the same thing. I also look at it much more actively. You yourself can develop a skill of seeing things differently. So I think one is like a car, and it's like one perspective is it's freedom. Another perspective is status. Another perspective is gas guzzler.
Yep.
And none of them are right. None of them are wrong. And if you think right and wrong, you're not going to get how the human mind works. I'll also add that they do another twist on it, which is to show the same idea with three different pictures, which is a slightly different twist.
Mm-hmm.
Two different people can look at the same thing and see it differently. They can also look at different things and see the same thing.
So I mean, a lot of your students are, about to go into the workforce or are in the workforce, but coming back to sort of be refreshed. I mean, what does this mean for someone sitting in a large organization with innovation or growth on their agenda? I mean, how can these tools be brought into service of their business or their professional agenda, do you think, Josh? I mean, a couple of examples, perhaps?
Yeah, all of these build up. I mean, these are foundational exercises. So there's another exercise that builds on this, which is the authentic voice exercise, which is to speak your inner monologue. And genuineness and authenticity in a leader are incredibly powerful. I mean, the last class that I taught at NYU happened to be everyone in the class voted for Hillary Clinton. And I said to them, okay, between Clinton and Trump, who is more authentic? And all of them agreed Trump spoke more authentically. Like, they disagreed with him, they didn't like him, but he spoke more authentically. It's tremendously powerful. And when someone doesn't speak authentically, it sounds like they're guarded. It sounds like if they're guarded, I will be guarded. And you lead, if you are not authentic and you're not genuine, you lead others to be inauthentic and ungenuine with you. And if they are protecting themselves, that means they're not sharing with you what motivates them. And if you don't know what motivates them, you're pretty much stuck managing them using external incentives. You can say, I'll give you a bonus if you do well, and I'll demote you if you don't do well. But you can't get at the emotions that motivate them, that got them there in the first place, that are more powerful than any emotion that you can try to layer on top of that. And then you're going to have people just complying, but not giving everything they have. And not because, when you have access to their emotions, because you learn to behave and communicate in ways that they feel comfortable sharing their vulnerabilities with you, then you can connect their passions to the tasks of your tasks. And they will love doing it. They will thank you for getting them to work harder. And that's what this unlocks. And that, leading people to work is like the smallest piece of that, because everyone that does this stuff is their spouse, their kids, their relationships with everyone start changing because their relationships become based on what they care about as opposed to literally what they do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I mean, this is we're coming back to the thing that we flagged at the beginning, which is the lead with empathy exercise. So maybe let's just, as an example of that dialogue to make that point. I mean, can you just perhaps outline what are the how do you teach people to lead with empathy, as you say, to sort of connect the passion with the agenda, if you like? Can you just give us a quick run through of how that works?
Okay, although I can't help but comment on how you've closed the circle. I'm really impressed. So sorry about that.
If you saw my desk, I've got plenty of pieces of paper on it, but I'm quite surprised I managed to as well, because it's a bit chaotic today.
So what the exercise is about is to give you behaviors to practice that when you do them, you'll find that people let down their guard and they open up about things that they really care about in a way that they often, there's a very clear sign with almost every case that I do where people feel like their expression is like, finally, I can talk about this. I've always wanted to. This is why I'm here. And see, if you tell someone, you can be open with me, I'm not going to judge you. It's, someone who's going to judge them is also going to say that. So it's not very credible. Just saying I'm not going to judge you, saying I will support you is not as credible as behaving in that way. So what this exercise does is you start by saying to somebody, what's your passion? And some people are a little uncomfortable with saying the word passion, although I think I was too. To be honest, I was originally uncomfortable with it, but with practice, I found it the most effective way to get the conversation going. But you can say, what's something you really care about? Or I notice that you work very conscientiously on this part of the project. It looks like you care about something there. What's that motivation behind it? And they'll almost always give you what I call a cocktail party answer, which is, they'll say, oh, I'm doing it for a living, or, I took a class in it, or something like that. They're giving you a slight answer. And in their minds, they know what motivates them. If it's more than most people, there's something there. But they know they're vulnerable. If I tell you what I care about, you could make fun of me, you could humiliate me, you could use me. I've been hurt before, I've been used before, and it was never about something that I didn't care about. It's something I did care about. So we've learned over our lifetime, protect myself. Don't share the important stuff. Only, not until someone's earned it. So the next step, then I say, the next step is what I call a confirmation clarification cycle. It's ask them to clarify. You say to them your understanding of what they said. They're going to correct you because there's no way that you can possibly in words communicate what their thoughts are. Even they can't communicate their thoughts in words. Our thoughts just move faster. Mm-hmm. They're more rich. So they'll correct you. And most people at that point say, oh, well, whatever. I guess I didn't really understand you perfectly. What this exercise says is, okay, take the correction, refine your understanding, and reconfirm your understanding. Ask a clarification question if you need to, but do not interject your own stuff. If they say, I like to travel, and you start saying, oh, travel, I just went to Paris, I loved it. They're going to think, oh, he was just talking or she was just talking, asking me a question so that you could talk. Mm-hmm. So you simply ask for a clarification. And the first couple times you do it, you think, they're going to correct you again. You're going to clarify again or confirm again. And they're going to correct you again. And you keep doing this. And you might think that it's going to be repetitive and they're going to get annoyed at you, but the opposite. It's each time you do it without injecting your stuff on top of it, they start feeling, oh, this person really wants to know. This person gets that there's something important here. And they're putting my interest before theirs. That rarely happens. And finally they come out and they say, what eventually it comes to what I call a universal emotion. It's an emotion that anybody would understand it. So someone might go to work because they want to earn money. But the reason they earn money is because, they got to pay the mortgage. And the mortgage is like, you eventually get to something like they want to provide for their family. And I think I call it universal because anyone in the world understands about it. If you have kids, you got to feed them and clothe them and stuff like that. And it creates empathy. me describing it in a few minutes to you over the phone is not going to convey the feeling that happens when you connect with someone. Mm-hmm. And then you feel that you empathize with them. And you do it once, it's kind of cool. You do it twice, you're like, oh, I kind of see what's going on here. Do it 10 times, and you have developed the skill of developing empathy in yourself and using it as a skill that you can learn like riding a bicycle. But there's no way that me saying it will get that feeling. It's only doing it. It's like the same thing that happens when you play a musical instrument. When you first play it, the instruction to play a scale is put your thumb here, your finger here, the next finger here, and hit the keys just like this. Very mechanical. It's the opposite of expressing yourself freely and expressing your emotions and discovering yourself. But if you do it enough, we all know, everyone who made it to Carnegie Hall stage, no matter how expressive they were and how much feeling is in the music, it began with this mechanical stuff. And something, it almost feels magical, but it's predictable. Happens that this genuine and authentic voice comes out of you that wasn't there before. And it comes through practice and rehearsal. And that's the foundation of my book.
And the power then is that once you've made that connection, you're able to lead people authentically in the direction that that you choose and get, bring the best out of people essentially.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me before doing this exercise, if I get their motivations and then I use those motivations to get them to do things, isn't that manipulating them? And after doing the exercise, when they see that the reason someone was there in the first place was to act on these emotions, and you're really more liberating them from the inhibitions of that they didn't want, to be vulnerable. And when you support them, after they start saying, when I was motivating people with money, that was manipulative. It's not that people really want money. It's what's the money for? And when you get to that level, the relationships you have, and they can be at work, it can be with your family, it can be with the people you just met, the relationships become more about what people care about. And the money, the money stuff will work out more effectively this way, but it's the relationships, the projects you work on are about what they mean. And that's what, anyone listening to our voices right now worked hard to get where they are. They sacrificed. They were in the office on Friday nights and Saturdays. They were working hard when they didn't have to because something mattered to them. And that's why they're working hard. Mm-hmm. And if you enable them to work hard for those reasons, they will love you for it.
Yeah. And I guess, some of us are lucky enough to have worked with managers or leaders who create this kind of relationship, this kind of dynamic. But let's be honest, the vast majority of us have also worked for people who use the carrot and the stick in a far more manipulative way. So I guess this gets me to my final question before we go to the 3 questions I sent you before, Josh. But Caroline, who introduced us, she had a hidden agenda in a hidden manifesto in her book. How to have a good day. Now, what's your hidden manifesto? If indeed there is one, in writing leadership step by step.
There's a couple. The one for the reader is that there's a couple. I think one of the fundamental ones is that if you see someone with a skill that you wish that you had, if you think they were born that way or you think that they have something special, that's very debilitating. And what I want people to come away from here is, if someone has a skill that you don't have, they got it through some experience. And I give you a set of experiences that will give you a very solid foundation in leadership. And if after that, there's going to be lots of, in one book, you're not going to become Nelson Mandela, even if you practice it a lot. So if you see someone with skills that you don't have, the message is, or the lesson is, if I replicate or can get some close approximation of the experiences that they have, then I will also have that skill. And that, I think, is one of the most enabling realizations and beliefs that you can have. If someone else can do it, they're human just like me. Mm-hmm. I can do it too. And on a personal level, I would like the book to, the reason I'm promoting the book is that I want empathy, compassion, creating the skill. Those are skills to create meaning, to create value, to create purpose, to uncover your passions and act on them. I want those to become skills that you can learn, like riding a bike. And I want to have a net increase of the empathy and compassion in the world. And the ability, I want people the way I think about it is, imagine the Middle East where everybody cares a little bit more about the people around them. That's my hidden agenda, is to increase that.
Lovely, lovely.
Not so hidden.
No, well, it's not anymore. Now you touched a little bit. I mean, we have the book which will be out by the time this show comes out. You also mentioned some other materials that support that. Can you just say a little bit about that? Because I think that's an important part of the experience of helping people on this step-by-step journey.
Well, if you read my blog, that's like I write every day, and so a lot of it is viewing the world through the perspective of having gone through this. The book is an integrated, comprehensive progression. Everything you need is in the book. Now, there's an online version, which is, if you go to spodekacademy.com, the online version is the same exercises, but it also has you see the stop signs in the book. Online, I make it part of the structure so that when you finish an exercise, the only way that you can get to the next exercise is you have to write your reflection. That gets posted to a forum. And a lot of students call the forum the best part, because for two big reasons. One, they get to see everybody else's experiences. So they see different people did it in different ways. And that really adds to the richness to it. And makes you part of a community. And leadership is fundamentally social. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that knowing that other people will read your reflections forces people to think more thoroughly and to write more thoughtfully. And so that raises the value, it raises the experience even more. So the online version it gives a more full experience, and it also forces you to do the exercises to get to the next stage. There's also a course in entrepreneurship, which is more about entrepreneurial thinking behavior, because a lot of people use it to be entrepreneurial without ever leaving the big company where they work. And it's a different set of exercises, but the same principles of learn by doing and showing people exactly what to do. And it's not about, I always have to differentiate. It's not like Shark Tank, and it's not like Lean Launchpad. It's really about developing skills, and there, instead of emotion and compassion, it's more about initiative and responsibility.
Yeah. And these are foundational skills that apply irrespective of industry, organizational size, or geography, I would imagine, right?
Oh, yeah. I've had CFOs from major media companies that were publicly traded. I've had entrepreneurs who have sold several of their businesses, and all the way down to 19-year-old kids taking this stuff, that all of them get, I would say, equal value, although different directions of the value.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Super. Well, let's include all of this in the show notes. Now, Josh, I sent you 3 questions in advance. So can we just move to those before we wrap up? First question, what have you changed your mind about recently?
So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a student at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty, it's related to the Earth Institute, which is one of the major places that does research on climate. And in the middle of the conversation with him, I was talking about leadership in that area, because I think we have all the facts. I think we should keep getting more information of how the climate is changing, but we don't have people influencing the behavior. That's what I think is necessary, because the carbon in the atmosphere isn't there. It's because of our behavior. Mm-hmm. And if you want to change behavior on a global scale, you need leadership. And I was talking to him, I said, who are big leaders in this field? And, I've asked this of a lot of people, and like a lot of people say Al Gore, or because Leonardo DiCaprio just came out with a movie, so they might mention them. But the most common answer is, I don't know anyone. And what dawned on me, and this is a big shift in my perspective, is that I ask people listening to my voice right now, like, who are people who are leading in this area and in the area of climate? And leadership meaning influencing other people's behavior. And I think the most influential people are the Koch brothers. Mm-hmm. So for people outside the US, these are people who are big into fossil fuels, and they're promoting that we have to keep studying and not regulate right now, maybe later, but let's keep getting more data. And what I realized was that I'm going to oversimplify, so please don't attack me on this, but hopefully you'll get to the underlying message and not catch me up too much on the details. But all these scientists are not opposing the Koch brothers. They're following the Koch brothers. They've gone into the field. Like if you look at their universal emotion for why they're studying the climate, it's not that they just want to know the facts, but that they want to change our behavior. They want to not have the Earth, the sea levels rise, and the global warm, everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. We don't want to see hundreds of millions of people displaced from their homes because their cities are flooding and so forth. And so what they're actually doing by getting more and more data to convince these people who are never going to be convinced, they're actually following those people. If you look at the behavior.
Interesting.
I don't know if that was like, I don't know. This is the first time I'm saying it. So I'm sure I invite people to come back and help me refine my thoughts in this area, because that was a realization that I have. I'm not saying that like this is the final answer that everyone should agree with me.
Yep.
But it was a change in belief.
Okay. No, powerful. I mean, it's not an easy question to answer. I'm glad that I don't get asked that question very often, to be honest with you. So next question, what do you do to remain creative and innovative?
So here, I wish I could say that this is exercises that don't come from me, but really it's Getting Things Done by David Allen is what's freed up my mind.
A previous guest on our show, actually, Josh.
Yeah, and he clearly, I remember listening to him on your show, and if I remember him, he very clearly said, you don't schedule time to be creative and be innovative. It doesn't take time. It takes mental freedom.
Yep.
And if you're trying to remember a lot of things, then you're juggling those things in your head, and that's taking up your mind from doing other things. Yeah, people should go and listen to that one.
Despite the dog snoring in the background, but that's another story. But so I mean, the point here is that you deliberately create space to do that in your life. Is that right?
Yeah, I just this morning got a tweet from someone who had a piece from The Guardian that was saying how productivity was messing everybody up because productivity was getting people having more stuff on their minds. And I was like, I tweeted back, that's the opposite of my perspective. The goal of managing my time is really about acting on my priorities. And when I do that, and I systematize, if I follow a system that works, it's to free my mind from other things. And then I can solve problems. The important stuff goes on my head, it goes to the forefront of my mind. And if there's a problem that needs solving, then I can solve it.
Yep. Wonderful. Third question, I mean, to what do you attribute your success in life? I mean, are there some specific skills or habits or mindsets that you've mastered that really have made a difference to you?
So I don't know how successful I can claim to be. I mean, I certainly enjoy my life more than, I don't know anyone who enjoys their life more than mine. And a lot of the stuff, you mentioned some of the things that I've done in my life, and a lot of people count that as like really cool things, PhDs and MBAs and stuff like that. Those are, from my perspective now, a lot of that was self-indulgent. Like I really enjoyed physics, so I kept studying it. Today, what makes me get things done, what makes me effective at what I want to do, is systematizing the stuff that I do. And if you read my stuff a little bit on my blog, you'll see that I do exercises every day. There are certain things that I do without fail, and that structure to my life is kind of like what David Allen does for scheduling your appointments and things in your inbox. I wake up in the morning, I do my burpees, I eat breakfast the same way, slightly different fruits and stuff, different times. But that structure is for me the difference between running in the sand and running on solid ground, or building on a shaky foundation and building. I used to say building on if you have decent habits, it's like building on a platform. But if you have really challenging, healthy activities that you do every day, I think of that as like bedrock. I find that like I don't have to worry about sleep. I don't have to worry about exercise. I don't have to think about my diet because I've created habits around those things. And now my life is about getting done what I really want to get done.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think I've heard it called by one of Tim Ferriss's guests. I mean, I think it's structure brings freedom, and it's counterintuitive, but you're absolutely right. And that's, when I feel that I'm sort of losing control of my, not on top of my game, it's often because I've let some of the disciplines that I've worked quite hard at embedding, I've let them slip a little bit, and it's a warning sign. So it sounds like you're on the same path, and actually probably better not falling off the wagon than I am.
To me, freedom exists within structure, exactly like you said. Freedom, moving without structure that's chaos if there's no structure to it. Like banging keys on the keyboard is one thing, hitting them in a certain way, you're restricting the possible ways that you could play, but you become much more expressive and you can express yourself. And there's a brilliant quote by Martha Graham that captures it perfectly, and it juxtaposes how through rehearsal and discipline and dedication to your craft, doing submission to your craft, you gain freedom and spontaneity. And it's, to anyone who hasn't gotten it, it probably sounds like nonsense. But to people who get it, it is the recipe. It's like rehearsal and practice and learning your craft, and that leads to freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful, Josh, to have you on the show. Where can people get in touch with you?
So joshuaspodek.com is my blog, and that's my personal notes. Spodekacademy.com is where my courses are available. The book, Leadership Step by Step, it'll be in all the usual places. As we speak now, it's on pre-order at Amazon. It goes live on February 16th. On Twitter, I'm Spodek. And, if you look up Spodek online, there's not too many of us. So it's easy to find me.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. And again, it's been great. I mean, I'm so grateful for Caroline for having made the introduction. Best of luck with the launch, and thanks very much for your time and your insight, not just in the book, but also today on the show.
Thank you. I measure the success of the book not by numbers sold, but by people that are able to use what it offers to improve their lives and the lives of people around them. So if that's what I'm trying to get at here, if that happens, I'm grateful to you.
Super. Well, we'll get it out there, and any feedback that comes back, we'll send it across to you. But yeah, let's keep in touch, and many thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hi, it's Mark again. So Josh has managed to pack a huge amount into a reasonably short period of time in terms of his achievements in academia, in business, and most recently in the world of executive development and publishing and media. And he pictures a world in which the skills like empathy and compassion and purpose are widely used and mastered by those who've actually taken the time to learn them. And his point is a very liberating one, is that anyone can indeed learn them, and his mission is to help people learn them in as painless a way and as pragmatic a way as possible. And he makes the point that simple acts and behavioral hacks, if you like, such as pausing to create space, can create immediate change in people. And cultivating mindfulness especially can help us look beyond the surface value of both things and people. And much of the curricula that's taught in higher education fails to offer people and make available to people these fundamental tools for success in business and in life. And so this is essentially what we're trying to do with Innovation Ecosystem, is make available the resources that I wish I'd had access to, or I did indeed have access to, when I was driving innovation in large companies. And many of these skills and these resources are foundational skills. And the example that he used of the exercise, the 3 raisin exercise, which he described and which I've conducted 4 or 5 years ago, is a great example of a really simple but very, very practical tool that can have profound implications. And you can download that tool in the show notes. Another key takeaway is one that we're very familiar with here at the Innovation Ecosystem, is that people love to know that they're not alone. Despite the challenges of their role, there are lots of other people in other organizations facing similar challenges, or have faced and overcome those challenges. And this was something that was revealed to us as we start rolling out the Innovation Leadership Circle. People love to learn from the experience of others, and this point was reiterated several times by Josh's description about the aspect of his teaching that his students found most rewarding. And this is the forum that he makes available, the technology-based forum, where students were encouraged to reflect on their experiences and share those experiences with others at the end of an exercise before proceeding to the next step on the journey. So plenty in here. Please let me know how you found the 3 raisin exercise. Drop me a note at mark@innovationecosystem.com, and feel free to leave a message on our website. And until next week, have a great week.